Alrighty guys, welcome to day 2, part 2. Today's gonna be a little interesting because I've kind of decided to do a few extra things while I'm in there. And part of that one is just gonna be an oil change. Makes the most sense. The oil is pretty dark, pretty black, and filter was pretty full of gunk. So I'm gonna be replacing that, doing an oil change. That shouldn't take too long, but I also need to do some carbon cleaning, and I'll show you guys here in a little bit what each cylinder kind of looks like, or what the ports look like. They are just caked. They've got carbon buildup, and it makes sense to get it cleaned up while I'm in there. So Cody's working on the detail right now. It's looking fantastic, and I'm going to be taking the front end of the car off. That way I have access to the crank pulley. That's going to be an interesting thing. I have to probably drain the coolant. I'm going to see if I can avoid that, but drain the coolant if I have to, get the front end of the car off fully, radiators and everything. And then yeah, I have access to clean the front of the engine and to rotate the crank to close valves up so I can do the cleaning. So yeah, this should be a fun day. I'll keep you guys posted on how things are moving along, but right now I need to just kind of evaluate where I'm at and yeah, start with this oil change. So catch you guys later. Alrighty guys, welcome back. I've made a little bit of progress since I checked in earlier. I have the crash bar disconnected. I've got this auxiliary cooler disconnected. Right now I'm trying to work on getting my radiator out. It's a little more difficult than expected. Unfortunately, I have to disconnect some extra hosing, like up here, going to some of the coolant pipes, and it's just a mess. But we come over here and take a look at my coolant. Yeah, that's disgusting. Not very well maintained, that's for damn sure. So currently just trying to figure out what I do and don't need to do to get this out of here. It's a little difficult because I want to be able to clean the front of the engine. I want to be able to do this carbon cleaning, and to do this carbon cleaning, I need to be able to rotate the crank, and I need to be able to get a wrench on there. And you can see there's very little room down in there, and really not enough to get a breaker bar with any kind of socket on it. So yeah, just a fun project. So this is turning into slightly longer than expected. It's only day 2, but I'm seeing this going a little longer. Good news is most of the assembly was not breezy, but easier than expected. So yeah, just trying to get this coolant out, trying to make sure I can clean the front of this engine. That's really a big part of it, and clean these ports. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. Alrighty guys, so I want to explain a little bit about what this leak is, what causes it, and just kind of, yeah, the basics of it. It gives you some tips as well to just kind of self-diagnose if you've got a car like this, or even just really any car. Trying to figure out what's going wrong with it, what's maybe leaking. This should be a good video for that. Let me actually, I need to grab some gloves. Okay, now for everyone's favorite thing from elementary school, show and tell. Oh dear. So this is my oil filter manifold. This sits at the back of the engine, at the top of my engine, and houses the oil filter in here with its cap. Now, this thing right now is nasty. It is just caked in oil, so I think I had a few different leaks going on here. But what really is leaking in this engine? Why do I have 2 leaks coming from the same place? So if you look the bottom of this manifold, we have kind of 3 ports. So we've got 1 here and 2 here. I call these the 2 legs. So this is our first leg, our front leg, and kind of our back leg, or our base. And pretty much we've got O-rings that seal each of these, and I'm going to set this back down, which are right here. So this is that O-ring for the second leg, the base, and then this is the O-ring for that front leg. Now, with Audi gaskets in general, or gaskets in general, they age, right? They harden, and they don't seal anymore, because part of a gasket's job is to expand and to seal a gap. And these just stop doing that. Now you can kind of see on camera just how square it is. The new one is not square. The new one is rounded, and it's also a lot more pliable than this one. This one feels very hard, very solid. Now, the rear one is an interesting story because it's not as bad. You can still see it getting kind of square. And I don't know if that focused. I'm sorry if it didn't. If not, we'll post some pictures with the video. But this almost looks like it's newer, like it's been replaced already. Now, in tearing this engine apart, I'd say that it could have been serviced before. Based on the reassembly of some things, you can kind of tell that someone had been in here, but at the same time, I don't think anyone really had. And if they had, it would have been an Audi dealership or a really good Audi technician, because their reassembly of things is a lot better than most either independent shops would be, or most individuals, if they do it. So I think someone's been in there before, but I'm not really sure. Either way, it's leaking now, and so that back leg I showed you sits on the back of the engine, the front leg sits in the valley, and so that's 2 gaskets from the same part. They're known to fail on these cars. You know, they're known to be to do this, to get really hard and square up. And I'm surprised we actually got this out in one piece. I expected it to break, but I'm already looking at it now, and yeah, there we go. So very brittle, and yeah, it's just gaskets in general. You know, O-rings, they tend to dry up, they tend to harden up, and they no longer seal. So you get some oil flow bypassing them, and a fairly large leak. So that's kind of the one thing that could be for those 2 leaks. Now, when I opened this up, I had oil on the driver's side valley as well as the passenger side of the valley. And really, this would only introduce oil down the driver's side of the valley, given the channels and the cooling, or not the cooling, sorry, the drainage channels. So I also think that I have a valley pan gasket leak, which I'll show you in a minute as well. Most cars, for their valley pans, it's a cooling item and a cooling system. For this, it's actually an oil cap. I forget the technical term that they used for it, but it's actually a separator, if you will. So it separates a lot of the bad oil, to my knowledge at least, separates some of the bad oil from the cleaner oil. So it is and it isn't a valley pan, a true valley pan, but it's in the valley, and it is the only plate-like thing in my valley, and so Audi calls it their valley pan gasket. So that I'm looking at it now. I can see the area in which it was seeping, most likely. And that's actually a metal, it's just a metal plate pretty much with a raised bit for the gasket. Same deal. You know, that could have cracked, that gets hard and just doesn't expand the way it needs to anymore to really seal that up. So I think that's what was introducing the oil on the passenger side of the Valley, and I think the oil filter manifold was what was introducing the oil down the back of the engine as well as the driver's side of the Valley. So in total, 3 leaks coming from 2 parts. I'll show this as well. Actually, let me take off my gloves so I can show you with the camera. Cam solenoids, or VVT solenoids. If you look right here, you just see the amount of residue coming from that, and same on that side. I think it's reasonable to say that those are leaking as well. They have a single O-ring that tends to fail. And actually, I just drained the oil so I can... oh, the screw's back in. I'll be right back. Okay. Now for the VVT solenoid. So this just back here, just pulls up out. And you can just see it's got an O-ring actually right there, which I can just see is completely flush. Given the amount of residue that's just on the outside of this, where things were coming up, I'd be willing to bet that this was also just oozing oil up out, as well as on the passenger side. You know, at this mileage, if it's never been done before, if it's never been fixed, that's likely to be the case. And this is the best time to do it. Again, I said this in part 1, but if you are disassembling something to this level, get all the gaskets that you're going to be taking out, because the gaskets are cheap. Those O-rings, I'm actually getting out of a not a Harbor Freight kit, but a decent O-ring kit to replace. I'm not even using the OEM Audi, which I know some people would be like, oh no, but to get those OEM rings, you've got to rebuy the cam solenoids, which I don't need to replace those solenoids. I simply need to replace their gaskets. So yeah, I mean, in total for a job this deep, maybe you're spending $100 on gaskets, but the time that you're taking to tear everything down makes changing these little things so much easier. Otherwise, you are really kind of screwing yourself, to be honest. If you dig in this deep, put everything back together, and then 2 months down the road, you've got another leak. So at this point, I also am a clean freak when it comes to engines, engine bays. This is nasty. And I really want to make sure that the front of this engine's clean, the valley is clean, and anywhere that there's oil residue, we blow it off. So we've got a steamer, a steam cleaner. We're gonna try to use for getting rid of a lot of this caked on stuff. But to clean the front of the engine, you know, I've got to get this bracket off. I've got to get you know, this big piece and the radiator out, because then you can really just walk up to the front of the engine. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, though. I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I can. It's a big thing to remove, and right now I'm kind of struggling with the Audi manual. It's explaining some things nicely, but at the same time, you know, they show something on their diagram and you're wondering, where the hell is that? You've kind of got to see other parts around it to reference what they're asking you to change. So yeah, it's exciting stuff. And while we're here, I can show you the carbon cleaning and why I need to do it as well. So these cars are direct injection engines. And what happens with a direct injection engine is you don't get fuel spray prior to the valves. You get it after the valves, directly into the cylinder, in the name. So what that means is that an import injection engine, where this injects prior to the valves, you get fuel spray kind of over the valves, and it helps clean the valves. It helps clean the port. In this engine, we don't have that. So we have a fair bit of carbon buildup. It's just carbon deposits that over time build up. The old kind of saying, give it the Italian tune-up. One of the reasons to do an Italian tune-up, high revs, is to really clean an engine that is direct injected, or to just clean out the ports, you know. Even if it's a port injected engine, if you drive it kind of softly, you're not going to get the cleaning action as well as you do if you drive it, you know, high RPMs. If you drive it fun and spirited. So in this engine, let's take a look. Actually, let me find my flashlight. Okay, so you can see in there, kind of, I'm doing my best. Especially on that left valve, you can just see kind of a big, there we go, amount of carbon buildup. And that happens in every single port here. I have 10 cylinders, obviously, so we have 10 ports that need carbon cleaning. And what we can see, and let me put this paper towel back, you can see 2 of the valves, I think. Yeah, 2 of the valves, right, because 2 are the exhaust. So we can see both intake valves. So I've got 20 valves that need cleaning, the stems as well as the bases, the heads of them, because what happens with this carbon buildup as well is you end up getting an engine that the valves don't seat, or they don't seat properly, they don't seat quickly enough. So your engine just doesn't run as well as it should. Now, you're not going to clean this and see 20 more horsepower. Well, maybe actually 20. You're not going to see a whole lot, though, and it's not going to be totally noticeable. Your engine should run smoother. You know, rough idle is one of the symptoms of this. Low on power. You know, if you know the feeling of this car when it's completely clean, then you know what it starts to feel like if the valves aren't, or the carbon buildup is getting too big. So, yeah, it's an interesting process. I need to find out. I need to get some wire brushes. I need to get some decarburizing solution. There's a few out on the market, but I'm trying to get some in this week, right, so I can complete this week. So I've got to see what the auto store has. But yeah, it's exciting to get this cleaned up. It's a little stressful at the same time when you start to find things like oil mixed in with the coolant. So yeah, it's been fun, and right now it's just more disassembly before we can really truly fix the problems. So all right, guys, so we're a few hours later. Kyle and Cody kind of took off. Cody, I forget what he was doing. Kyle had to go to like some birthday party. So I've kind of been taking a slower pace. We've made a lot of progress, and you're about to see. This engine is nasty. We found the leak. It is what we thought it was. So an oil filter manifold. And again, we'll do a little more in depth on this when we get the chance. We'll do another video before we put this back together on what gaskets we're replacing, what's leaking, why it may be leaking. But now you get to see kind of what the inside of my engine looks like, or the valley of my engine looks like. So it is nasty. And you can just see the amount of oil there on the right side. It's kind of insane. I've already cleaned up this side a decent amount, but man, the driver's side valley is just filled with oil. I added a little more when I took off the manifold, the filter manifold, but really this was pretty bad leak. And what happens is it leaks down at the back here where these paper towels are. And as it pools, it actually runs down the valley. There's these drain holes, and you might be able to see one of the drain holes, the pass-throughs there. it runs from the back of the engine to the front. So you have a leak at the top back of your engine. It comes all the way down here and all the way out the front. And unfortunately, there's an accessory wheel here. Honestly, I'm pretty sure it's attached to the crank. So it's a crank pulley that's got an accessory belt running off of it. And once you hit or get oil on that, it just flings it everywhere. And the whole front of my engine is coated in oil. You can just see how nasty it is, especially along the sides there. So yeah, you get a leak at the back, it runs to the front, makes a mess everywhere. And now I have a second leak at the back of the motor. And surprisingly, I'm calling it the same thing, because that oil filter manifold, it has a leg that comes down here, but it also has a leg that comes here. And you'll see when that one leaks, you can see the residue there. It runs off the back of the engine. So one part that's leaking, two gaskets, you get a leak on the front, and you get a leak on the back of the engine. And it is a pretty severe leak. When you can just see the amount of oil sitting in there, it is a decent amount of oil. And so I don't know if this is what's causing the smoking. There's a few things that cause the smoking. I really thought replacing the CV boots on this side would do it, because I was pretty sure that the CV grease was just coming up and hitting the exhaust manifold in there. I got that fixed, and it wasn't smoking as bad, but it was still smoking. And it comes right out of this area, so where you've got the paper towel there, it's just that corner smokes. And as I said earlier, I just had this into the shop for a valve cover replacement, gasket replacement, and Audi recommends you replace this cover because it warps. And the shop I went to, good guys, they've done decent work so far. I have some things I would do myself differently, but they've done a decent job. They had to warranty their work and redo this gasket replacement, but they still didn't replace the cover. And I'm pretty sure what happens is back here in this corner, you get a drip, and it drips onto the exhaust and smokes up from there. So that's one of the things it could be. One of the others, and I won't remove that towel because it's keeping coolant from going everywhere, but we have these. Now these are cam adjuster solenoids, and pretty much what they control is oil flow into the variable valve timing system. They're solenoids that just control the oil flow. And there's 4 of them. There's one underneath that towel. There's one here. You can kind of see the one tucked in there. And then there's another one over here again. And they have a single O-ring down at the bottom. And kind of a typical, I guess, for this engine is any O-ring that's down deep in the engine likes to flatten out, harden, and it doesn't expand to seal anymore after a certain age. And so you get bypass out of that solenoid. And just looking at the residue kind of around it, I would also assume that that is one that's leaking. I know some of you may be watching this and thinking, oh, well, your timing chain covers were leaking probably. And I bought a borescope because you can't see that stuff just with your naked eye. And so I bought a borescope, checked it out, and it's completely dry. All the way around is completely dry. It's not leaking to my knowledge. And it's not as common of leak as these on these engines as you'd think. I know Audi engines, timing chains, they're just the bane of our existence for Audi owners. But in reality, this is a decent engine. This is decently built. The engineering, as you were taking this apart, is insane. They obviously didn't design it to be maintained very well or very easily. But it is very cool to see a V10 just torn apart. This is the same basis V10 that's used in several different cars. The R8, you had the Gallardo, you had the S6, the RS6, of course. In Euro spec, used a twin turbo version of a 5-liter variant of this engine. This is a 5.2 liter. So it's a pretty common platform in the Volkswagen Audi group. obviously used on less cars than, say, their 4.2 V8 that is in my A8L and many others. But yeah, all their engines are pretty well put together. I think aside from maybe the A4, none of them really have just an Achilles heel, if you will. Aside from the timing components, and the A4 has that, I forget what it is, some little metal cap that wears down and falls down into your timing components and just wrecks your engine. But yeah, so this has been a long day. I'm probably just going to get that other VVT Solenoid kind of unhooked and ready to be pulled out. And I'm done with this assembly. Today was all disassembly, and we're there. So I'm going to get those things unhooked, and then tomorrow, probably in part 2 of this video, comes the gasket replacements and assembly. As I said, we'll do a video kind of explaining why things are leaking, where they're leaking, and how to diagnose, because a big part of owning an Audi, if you're going to own an older Audi, you can't be afraid of them. You've got to be aware that they are not the most reliable cars in the world if maintained poorly. So it's troublesome because you've got to buy one in the first place. And if you buy a used Audi, unless you've got just tons of maintenance records, you have no clue how it was maintained prior to your ownership. But once you own it, don't be afraid to wrench on it. I've been very inspired by one of my favorite YouTubers, Tavares, on his wrench every day, and just wrenching on cars that most sane people would never touch. But for me, I like that attitude of working on things yourself. And myself, I'm a mechanical engineer by schooling, by trade, and I love this stuff. I love being able to tear apart into an engine, take a look at how it was designed, and just see what someone else designed and what someone else thought would work well. Because I like taking it apart and thinking, well, could it really have been done better? And a lot of times you find on these engines, they did the best they could. They just knew that their engines would need pretty massive maintenances or services and a pretty hefty maintenance schedule in order to stay running well. So the goal with this car, it's 111,000 miles, so it's not perfect. And yeah, it's really not perfect, but I want to get it to a point that it's a damn good car. I want to know that my Valley is spotless. I want to know that any leaks that could possibly happen in here won't happen for another 60 to 80,000 miles. I really want to know that I've taken good care of it and I've rectified any of the poor maintenance done in the past. So I love this car to death. And again, we'll do a walkthrough on it. It's a pretty rare spec, and I absolutely love it. It's been a stressful ownership so far, but completely in love with it still to this day. And yeah, I hope, once I get a space of my own, these guys, ThirdBayGarage, very gracious to lend me their third bay for this work. And I hope one day that I will have a shop of my own with lifts. And though it is crazy, I'd love to be able to do some of this work myself and some of the major services myself, dropping the engine and servicing things as needed, because in reality, I don't want to have to spend $4,000 to drop an engine and to maintain. So I want to be able to do it myself. The gaskets for this job costs, I believe, $64 is what I spent on everything for this job. That's not a lot, and you consider taking this into a shop for work. This job itself probably would have been north of $2,000. And that's just given the complexity. Someone does have to spend hours and hours and hours disassembling this, then 10 minutes to switch out the gaskets, and then hours and hours and hours putting it back together. But I like that. And, if I weren't an engineer, I'd probably be a mechanic. But I've had a very fun day. Very much enjoyed this. And it's good to know that what I'm doing is going to get this into a much better place. And that it's hopefully not going to have major issues going forward. So we'll keep you guys tuned. As I said, we'll have an assembly video, a part 2 to this, as well as a few other videos coming out of this project, kind of explaining what we've done, and self-diagnosis tips, just a handful of things. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one.